Welcome everyone to another episode. I'm so excited to be here with you all. It's Annalena, and today I have a very special guest with me here. Her name is Jenn Cohen. I'm gonna briefly introduce her, and then we're gonna have a wonderful, deeply intuitive conversation. So, Jenn Cohen has always been captivated by the power of intuition, and after a life-changing experience in her 20s, she explored how intuition could shape her life and career. During her 27 years in the entertainment industry, Jen found that intuitive decisions often led to success. Now an intuitive consultant, she helps individuals and organizations unlock potential, gain clarity, and achieve their goals through practical, intuition-based strategies. Jen's work fosters growth, creativity, and purpose in both personal and professional realms. I absolutely love this. I'm so happy you're here. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's such a delight for me because I actually call myself an intuitive business guide because I could never work with just these masculine strategies out there. And I also know strategy is important, but I learned that the feminine energy has to come first, right? There is this deep wisdom we have in our body. And anytime I tried to override it, like things got really hard. I felt like I'm not cut for this entrepreneurial journey. And at some point I was like, I just gotta surrender to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I dealt with that quite a bit in my
Yeah.
entertainment space. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm super delighted because you obviously have even much more experience with this. I'm actually really curious to learn from you. And I love that you actually, yeah, you work in the entertainment industry. I think there it's probably not the hottest topic to work with intuition, I would think, but maybe it's way different. That's why I'm really curious to hear about it. But before we dive into this, I would love to hear how it all began. And I think there's a little story you want to share with your dad.
Yeah. Yeah. So I first learned about the power of intuition uh, when my dad passed suddenly when I was age 20.
Mhm.
And I was talking with him the evening before, and he called me, and I was in college at the time, and it was the first weekend of my junior year. So you can imagine we were all just getting ready to go out and
Mhm.
and ring in the new school year. And I remember him calling me on the landline. That's how long ago it was, but it was a landline, and a roommate coming in and handing me the phone. And it was amidst a lot of chaos that was going on, just in terms of 10 girls getting ready together. And there was something in his voice where, looking back, there was something he knew that he needed to talk to me that evening.
Mhm.
And I remember, saying, "Can I call you tomorrow?" He said, "Of course." And then he said, "I love you." And there was just a tinge in the way that he said, "I love you,"
Mhm.
that I kind of cocked my head and just said, "Oh, that was interesting." And just again, being a 20-year-old, just kind of went about and had a good night, to wake up the next morning to a phone call from my mom that he had passed, and very suddenly, heart attack. And so at the day of his funeral, I was very overwhelmed, and went back to my mom and dad's bedroom, and I lied on his side of the bed, and it was pitch black, pitch dark, no lights on. And I just remember, kind of calling out to God at that time and just saying, "No, what am I supposed to do now?" And at that moment, the bedside light, which was turned off, flashed on and off, on and off. And I just kind of stopped crying and looked around, and I said, "Dad, Daddy, is that you?" And the light switched on and off and on and off again. And it
Wow.
was, yeah, it was just this moment of complete knowing that this is not all that we have on this physical earth, that there is definitely something out there, and it's communicating with us, and that, one instance turned into many instances where he and I grew closer and had a relationship when he passed in a way that we could have never had on this physical earth. And he would send me signs through lights, through ladybugs.
Wow.
Yeah, just all different kinds of signs. And I got really caught up in the anger phase of the grieving process, and again, as a 20-year-old, just thinking about all of the life that he's going to miss out on for me. And in that moment, out of anger, I just said to him, I said, okay, you left. I'm not going to have you. I'm going to turn over my career to you. And you've got this job now, and you're going to make sure that I am always secure and safe in this way. And I truly believed that. And that anger just became through the years, a belief that I could let go of, that I
Mm.
could completely trust that my dad was going to take care of this for me. And it opened up so much space and so much, allowed me not to have so much anxiety and worry. And of course, there are bumps along the way. But when I would always pause and come back to that moment and this contract that I had with him, this pact that I had with him, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that he was so willing and overjoyed to accept that responsibility for me.
So you really felt like you could lean on him and he
Yeah,
was there for you, you know?
absolutely. And in college there's a lot of stress about, what are you going to do? What are you going
Oh,
to
yeah.
Yeah, and what are you going to major in? And he took care of that for me. I was majoring in a major that I did not necessarily want to be in, and he he really allowed me the capacity to see um, synchronicities that allowed me to get into a space through internships, through early jobs. And it was very guided. It was very guided.
I love this. So you are working together with your dad in the spiritual realm, so to say, to really trust what we call intuition, right? We
Absolutely.
just know, and I often say it doesn't make sense, right, to the logical mind, where people are like, why are you doing this? Well, I don't know, but I know, but I
That's
can't
right.
explain it. So
That's right.
that's so beautiful. And of course, I'm so sorry to hear also that he passed away so early. At the same time, it's also such a beautiful story because I think fear of death is something that is a big topic for all of us. And I have to say, stories like this, they just help us get comfortable with that because that's the one thing that's inevitable for all of us, right? That's the one
Exactly.
thing that is certain. And how beautiful it is to know that there is something which we may call on the other side. And yeah, it's just in a different energy, I guess. That's not
Yeah.
a physical body.
Yeah. It's a new level, I say, of the relationship.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe here on planet Earth, what we're experiencing is just like this tiny little thing. Maybe it's gonna just get better and better. Like, why not?
Why not? No, I believe that. I believe this is
Yeah,
just a blip in our journey.
yeah. So we better do the very best we can every day, right? To enjoy
Yeah.
it. To
Yeah.
trust our intuition, like our life depends on it.
Hmm.
So, yeah, tell me a little bit about working in the media industry. So I also know you have been working with DreamWorks, IMAX, NBC Universal, Warner Media. I mean, these are really big names.
Yeah.
So, how did you get into that industry and how did you bring in your intuitive gifts? Like, are they open to this? I guess.
It's certain people are. So first I majored in pre-law. That
Hmm.
was that was the major that I thought my parents wanted me to be in, and so that's where I went. And quickly did an internship at a paralegal's office where the phone was ringing, and I looked at the phone. I said, "Ugh, that's bad news. Like that's not going to be pleasant." And so I'll say my dad very quickly directed me to, at the time, it was kind of like you had ads on a bulletin board at the school, kind of hall. And I visited that once and I found an internship, and that internship led me to my first role in the entertainment industry. And again, there's more layers to that story, but it was again very guided. And I started very fortunate enough to have started my career when DreamWorks SKG was launching, basically a year into them launching. And from there, I was able to, make my way through different studios, through different mediums. And then the last place I worked was at Warner Media. And what was interesting about my career is that I worked on the production side, I worked on the marketing side, I worked on the corporate side, I worked with sales, I worked with clients, and I worked with talent. I worked with writers, musicians. And so I would say that the creative side of the house is very open to the intuitive way of
Yeah,
living,
that makes
ex
sense.
extremely open. And so I could have a very uh, uh, e- open relationship with that side of the house. And then as I kind of worked my way up the ladder, I found myself more on the corporate side. And on that side of the house, intuition is not something that was
Mm.
freely talked about. It was much more in the masculine, like we were talking about. It was much more a patriarchal way of looking at things. And so I had to find ways in order to always come back, make that U-turn back to myself, and consult my intuition more than anything. And it got repeatedly more difficult towards the end of my tenure in the corporate space of entertainment, which then triggered my exiting in that role that I was in and becoming an intuitive consultant, where I help people and businesses get clear on their intuition now.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I also spent many years in corporate until my body was telling me you're not meant to be here.
That's it.
Because that's the thing. There is no real space for intuition because there's always how can we make more profits? How can we increase the profits the year after? So there's a lot of push and force, even though maybe sometimes more profits is not what's best, for everybody involved. And because even in nature, we don't just go up, up, up. On the stock market, we don't just go up, up, up. Sometimes it has to go down. We need to be okay with it. And then we have a gentle upward trend again, according to the natural flow of life, right? It's just we have created
Absolutely.
this kind of artificial way of it only has to go up in the numbers game. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it feeds into the ego. It feeds
Mhm.
into, who's the CEO at that time. And if
Yeah.
and if it's, in opposition of nature, if it's opposition
Mhm.
of, kind of a stormy weather, then
Mm.
that reflects poorly on them, where
Of
that's
course, yeah.
that's
Because the
that's not the
CEO probably
case.
has pressure to get the numbers up, right? So they don't even have a choice there. And I guess
Right.
it's now that you have chosen to be your own boss, right? And offer this service that those people that see the value in that build businesses, which I think is more and more the trend these days, where we also, I think, hopefully see bigger corporations that actually live more in alignment with nature and our
Yeah,
intuition. So
exactly.
tell me a couple of success stories where you had the courage to follow your intuition, even though maybe the logic was all against it.
Hmm. Yeah, sure.
Like what happened?
Yeah. I would say the first one was leaving my first job, which was DreamWorks. And it was such a great place to work. It
Mm.
was amazing. I worked in the animation sector of it.
Wow. It
And
sounds fancy, I have to say.
oh, it was so fun too. It was just I would call it kind of my fifth year of college. It was just young, hopeful. There wasn't a release yet that everyone was, measuring success against. It was just this really hopeful, visionary place, and it still is. It still is. But at the time, there's just nothing that can replace those first few years. And I could have stayed there forever. I could have stayed there forever. And yet there was nothing wrong with it when I left. It was just my intuition, basically saying, okay, you know, we've kind of hit a bit of a growth, plateau here. And it's time to venture out. And I ventured out and I went to IMAX and became an international marketing, um, did international marketing, I should say, for them. And that led me to go to and explore countries and meet new people and see much more, a diverse way of working and of connecting. And so when my time up was up at IMAX, I could see the next steps, and whether that time was something that I chose or whether it was, budget cuts. And this happens in the entertainment industry um, all the time, I should say, and especially recently. But that first, venture out and knowing that going into the unknown when you're feeling a little wobbly and feeling a little uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
it's not something to be afraid of. It's something to charge forward with.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, comfort is, great. It's it's just that your intuition doesn't necessarily want you to stay there for an extended period of time.
And the
It,
comfort, yes, yes. Yeah, because we are comfortable being in the comfort zone, right? All of us. And
right.
anything, even though it's something amazing, if it's new, it's uncomfortable for us because it's the unknown. And so we tend to sabotage ourselves to stay in the familiar, even though that may not be our path. So I have a question for you because I actually, when I was still in corporate, which was over 7 years ago now, and I started to feel at some point, this is no longer for me. And I started to look into coaching, self-development, and I got excited about it. And I didn't take the bold step to quit my job right away. I also was single mom, I had to pay my bills, and it felt very scary. And it didn't feel safe in my nervous system. I didn't have, I was just working with clients here and there. I didn't have enough income even to do that, right? So I kept going with it. And then eventually, how it all came about, I was at a retreat. I think it was the beginning of August in 2018. And I wrote a contract. It was from my coaching community, and we had a business coach there. And I wrote a contract to myself that I would quit my job once I had X amount of clients. And I signed it. I talked it out in front of a big group. So I had lots of witnesses. They even signed it. And I remember he telling me, like, no, you're ready. And I was like, I was so scared. And then it was 2 weeks later, maybe not even 2 weeks, that I got a email from HR, a meeting in my office the next week without a topic. And I knew, I was like, okay, I'm gonna get fired. The day before I packed my stuff, I already told some of my colleagues, and they were like, what do you mean? Are you crazy? I was like, no, I know. And that's how it was. My boss came in, and here in America, it's very cut and dry. They don't even say anything. It's kind of sad, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was just like, this is your last day. And I was like, okay, I already packed my basket. I was carrying this big, beautiful basket that you take to farmers markets. And yeah, I
Mm.
just left. And I felt this deep sense of freedom, but I was also scared, of course.
Yeah.
But now I have been an entrepreneur for almost 7 years. It wasn't easy, to be honest, always. There were lots of,
Mm-mm.
especially in the beginning, lots of ups and downs. I had months where I didn't know the money's coming from, but there was always this inner knowing, even like still today, where anytime where just this idea of like, oh, should I do it? corporate job again, my whole body is like, absolutely freaking no.
Oh my gosh, yes,
So,
exactly. Yes,
and still, and sometimes people are like, yeah, but don't you want to take like the safe path? And wouldn't it be easier if you just have a corporate job? Because let's be real, when you have your own business, I think no matter at what stage you're at, right? No matter how successful you are, there is no certainty. And then I'm always like, you know what? I had the certainty of my paycheck, but I also experienced that they can just let you go from one day to the other. You have nothing.
yeah,
So isn't that almost the bigger risk, you know?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I'm sharing this because trusting our intuition can look differently, right? Sometimes it's like, no, you gotta walk away from it or you gotta quit now. But there are other times where, yeah, but it's here, we have to wait for the right time and not actually force it. And I feel like that's how it was in my case. So
Absolutely.
I would
That's
love
how,
to,
yeah.
yeah.
That's actually how it was for me when I left completely. I was thinking about leaving 2 to 3 years before I actually left.
Ah, okay. That's
Yeah.
really good to know because
Yeah.
when I also work with people, I'm always like, no, you don't just have to jump off the cliff because sometimes, no, I think always actually, there is this divine timing. And
Yeah.
usually when something is really meant for me, just like with the podcast name change, this one was a little bit quicker, but it already started 6 months ago. I had some other insights and then I went the other way first. But then all of a sudden it was all coming together. Now I was just like, oh, of course, here we go, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I couldn't have figured that out several months before that.
No, intuition does not often get loud, but it does repeat itself.
Right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
think that's actually a big misconception that I have heard many times when people say your intuition only speaks once.
Oh no.
And
Yeah.
I mean, okay, like it depends on the circumstance. If
Sure.
I'm driving in the car and my intuition is like, make a right here because there's an accident on the left, or there's a tree blocking the road, or I'm meant to go to the store. That's that in the moment daily life kind of stuff where,
Yeah.
yes, you gotta listen to it in the moment. I have this too. I tell you a funny, which is actually not a funny example. So I wear contact lenses,
Mhm.
and so you take your contacts out with you, and anytime my nails get too long, it's easy to scratch your eye. And there was this one time where I took it out, and I had this like, you gotta be careful, you need to cut your nails, and I didn't do it, and I scratched, and then you cut some of the veins, and I've
Yeah.
had several of those things where I just like, whatever, or with my clothes, if you do this, you're gonna have a stain, and I didn't listen. Of course, I had a stain on my clothes, I was like, really,
Right.
Angelina.
Yeah.
And I just had something actually a few days ago, and I was like, wow, my intuition is really spot on, and I better listen to it even more.
Well, that goes back to, the name of your podcast before, the magic pause, where
Yeah.
it's yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's really
layered.
like take a pause
Mhm.
and choose to listen or choose not to listen, which I think it's better to listen. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I love this because I think it's very practical for the listeners. Like there are different ways of how our intuition speaks. There are different circumstances, like the day-to-day stuff. But then I feel like the big decisions in life, this is also something, I don't know if you're familiar with human design. That's something I talk a lot about.
Yeah.
With my audience. I'm a teacher of this and all of it. But there's something about decision making, and anytime when it's about making a big decision, it's more wise to take your time, really feel into the body, because we can get easily influenced by other people. And again, the mind is very strong trying to convince us of something. And I've always felt if something is really meant, like changing that name or starting a new course or ending the business collaboration, whatever this is, if it's really meant, then it just keeps coming and it keeps coming and it keeps coming. And then it just naturally unfolds. If this is me quitting the job, or if this is me initiating a conversation, and even that, it happens effortlessly, I find. It's never forced.
Yeah.
But there is an element of waiting. There's an element of slowing down and being patient for the right moment to occur. And
Yeah.
sometimes the universe takes care of it for you, right? Where it's just like, all right, you're gonna get fired. You're like
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
excited inside because you know you probably wouldn't have done it yourself.
Yeah. And I would say that there's usually when I talk to people that have been let go, um, you know, there's usually a part of them that had thought about leaving
Yeah, right?
before. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And or just the situation was just not good and they were fighting through it and they were pushing through it. And there's some relief when that happens, when they can let go of, if they're angry at it, if they feel betrayed, if they feel like I've given my life for this and look at how they treat me,
Mm.
there's something there's something behind those feelings that aren't necessarily tied to the job, that your intuition is really expediting
Mm.
the situation for you to get clear on.
Yeah, I love that. So, what would you recommend for people that are listening right now that feel maybe that are not really in tune with their intuition or they want to do a better job with that? What's the
Sure.
most important to start the process?
I think the most important thing is the awareness that everybody has intuition,
Mm.
that everybody has access to it. It's not our job to hunt down our intuition. It's our responsibility to put ourselves in a place to hear it. And that means that there are practices that you can do. And I like to start with things that bring you happiness, that you like to do. If you're an avid reader, if you like to exercise, if you like to be by the ocean in nature, if you like to sing, listen to music, these are the places where your intuition can find you, because most likely you're relaxed,
Yeah.
you're in a place of receiving, and you're not really struggling, and your brain can kind of tune into the right side of hemisphere of your brain, where the left side of our brain is really the ones that keep us going and keep us organized and keep us checking our to-do list and checking it off. They bring a lot of critical judgment into our life, and when we can go to our right brain, and when we can go to those places of joy, we can be more present, because intuition can only reach us when we're in the present moment.
Mm. So you mentioned two things that I think are so important. The one was relaxed
Yeah.
because so many things in life, even the deep inner healing work. I mean, if when we're not relaxed, it's not going to happen.
No, no,
No,
it's
and
not.
also like you say, intuition, if we are trying harder and harder and trying to figure it out with the mind, we're actually pushing the intuition away. And if we get into a place of going out in nature, just playing, having fun, being more like kids, right? I think they always teach us the most.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's also why I think when we take a shower, and we enjoy
Yeah, yeah.
water drizzle over the body, that's usually when I have the biggest insights, the intuitive, because I'm not looking for it.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I remember it's so funny because how I take a shower now is so different from how I took a shower when I was working in corporate. That sounds so funny, but I could have 5 arguments with an imaginary person in the shower
Mm-hmm.
before I headed out to work.
Mm.
And what I started to practice was gratitude. And so when I would get in the shower, I would just say, I'm so grateful for this warm water. I'm so grateful for this soap. I'm so grateful, to be able to bathe, and I would start just to name things, and it would instantly kind of get me into that space where then I could receive.
Mm.
So gratitude again is another great way to call in that intuition. So you have that kind of pattern interrupt, that joy that you're finding. And then when you're in there, you become aware. You can basically, your awareness is of what's around you. And this can be done through gratitude or just naming, like, I see rocks in front of me. I see a tree. I see a red flower. And that gets you right into the present moment.
Yeah.
And then you can start to get curious and you can start to contemplate scenarios and you can take inventory of your body. And, if you're trying to make a decision or if you're trying to plan your next step, you can see, oh, is my jaw really tight when I think about that?
Yeah.
Does my chest constrict? Or am I more open and expansive? And that is your sign that you're tapping into your intuitive self more.
Mhm. I love that because I mean, gratitude is such a simple tool that is available to all of us, you know?
Hmm.
Because, yeah, it helps you to be more relaxed, to be more receptive, to be, like you say, in the present moment.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, otherwise, we're, like you say, you're thinking about arguments that may happen in the future. We get all anxious about it. And we also create yeah, like a low vibe energy in some way. It's a very
Absolutely.
repellent, where the intuition is like, let me wait a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
Or we think about stuff in the past, what happened, what could have done better, and then we're just disconnected. And yeah, it's
Yeah.
so simple, right? But it's so hard for us humans because we have, especially with the entertainment industry, which I also love, but it can be
Right.
so distracting. There's so much noise, there's so much stimulation around us that
Yeah.
takes us actually out of all of this. We compare ourselves and we think, oh, I should have this or be this, and we're
Right.
disconnected from the present
Yeah.
moment.
Their job is to create a culture,
Mm,
that people want to emulate.
yeah.
And their success is based on people believing in that culture, following that culture, being a part of that culture.
Mm,
And it's based on research, it's based on polling, it's based on feedback. And so it becomes this continuous loop of what they're creating for our culture. And if you don't necessarily fit into that, um, it could really wreak havoc on your position and your job.
yeah.
And yeah. And so being able to separate that, and it's a possibility to separate. There really is. But you have to be very strong in your integrity and in your inner discipline and how you show up for your truth and yourself. And if the entertainment industry is something that you feel passionate about, and for me, I did. You can find your tribe within there.
Mm,
And it became and becomes a much more easeful way of moving through the day. But these people are out there. It's not like I was the only one in that space that
mm,
believed in my intuitive abilities. Um, that just wasn't the case. And I was lucky enough to find my tribe and to find them in a way that boosted other levels of the job that I was not aligned with.
mm. Yeah, I love it so much. So another question that I have also to share from my own experience with it is like, how does intuition feel? From what I can say from my experience so far, it's always like a very grounded, calm, expansive feeling. There's no interference in the body. And what you said, like if there's tightness in the throat or tension anywhere in the body, it feels heavy or anything, that's not my intuition. That's usually more fear.
Yeah.
But I would love to hear, like, what's your experience with that?
Yeah. It's funny when you were talking about like just the thought of going back into the corporate space, like I'll go on, LinkedIn is a great example, and I'll see, just like job opportunities that pop up from past experiences. And my body is just like repelling against
Yeah.
it. And I can very easily then go into my mind trying to take over and saying, but look at the pay, look at the salary, look at and that chatter is not your intuition.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
ego trying to rationalize it, I think.
Yep. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah, I always find that the intuition comes first.
Hmm. Hmm.
Again, it's this very calm, grounded, very clear feeling.
Hmm.
Feels very effortless. And then either the ego is trying to rationalize it or coming up with all these fears to try to talk me out of it.
Right.
So,
Right.
for example, in my business, I have this all the time because I mean, having your own business is a roller coaster sometimes. You have to experiment a lot. And at some point, you find your lane. And I have changed up things so many times over the years. I mean, other things I have been also very, very consistent with,
Yeah.
including also this podcast. I've been here like over 3 years now, every week.
Yeah. It's great.
And if I would listen to the ego, I wouldn't have done so many of these things because what are people going to say? They're not going to take me serious anymore. They're going to be confused, or I can't and I shouldn't. And also, so I'm very much in this coaching space. I mean, coaching industry is pretty big, right? And what I noticed is there was always this very strong marketing language of like, this is what you have to do to get XYZ, and this is what you're doing wrong, and this is why, and da 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 da. And this never felt right to me because it wouldn't give space for my intuition. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, cool, this may be your truth, but I want to actually connect with what feels right to me. So I have actually found that when I choose mentors or coaches or guides, I can really only work with people when they're giving me this space to come up with my own truth. That's also how I work, because if I'm putting somebody into my idea of how things should be, that will never last sustainably,
Yeah.
because it's a lie for that person, because what's my truth may not be your truth.
Absolutely. And that's the same, when you're talking about intuition and how you feel it,
Mhm.
everyone feels it, like differently. How it comes to you is differently. Like when I would see that ladybug from my dad, other
Mm.
people would just see a red insect,
Yeah.
that flies around. I'm like, no, that's a sign.
Mhm.
And it was just in knowing. So like what you were saying, when your intuition is speaking with you, and it's a feeling of confidence and clarity versus that fear,
Mhm.
um and when in knowing, there's not a question attached to it.
Mhm.
Knowledge doesn't operate in language, we give language to it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so being able to, so many people don't um connect with their body. It's like they're just taking energy from other people, and especially if you're an empath,
Yeah.
and that's confusing because wait, what's mine? What's yours? And so being able, like you said, to get quiet and to pause and to be able to make that decision, it's an essential part of it. Where in a culture where everything's go go go, move move move, and in the industry that I was in, I worked on a couple shows that would have a timely turnaround, and so decisions needed to be made within 5, 10, an hour, 5, 10 minutes and to an hour.
Mhm.
And again, that's part of the job. But then when that situation isn't calling for my time, I don't need to live my life like it's on that timeline. I
Mhm.
remember, having moments where I'm like, I'm racing around so that I can relax, you know?
Probably backwards, right?
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just like I got to get all
Yeah,
this
it's
done so
like,
that I can relax. It's
yeah,
just like,
I'm gonna work my butt off and then I'm gonna enjoy my life, and
yeah.
then it's too late or something like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I
true.
mean, there would even be times where I wouldn't take vacation because it was like I could get a taste of that good life.
Hmm.
And then I would come back and say, oh, I know what I'm missing out on now. So I'm just going to work through this
Yeah,
and never take a break.
yeah. No, I love this. So I have a few more questions, or
Yeah.
kind of sharing you a little bit my journey also, because sometimes I feel like I'm doing my business too intuitively, which now talking to you, I feel like there is no too intuitive way, actually.
Mhm.
And that I'm fighting kind of the masculine way, you know? But I have found that as I follow my intuition, it leads me to the strategy that may work for me. It leads me to the masculine process that
Yeah.
somebody already put in place. That's more from the logical left brain hemisphere that then actually takes whatever I felt intuitively to step into to the next level, you know?
Mhm.
Um, and there are many times where I'm thinking like, well, but I should have done this already. I should have published a book already, or da 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 da. But because, for example, writing a book has been an idea or like an inner knowing for a really long time, many years. But the time still hasn't come, and it's okay. And I know it may be in 2 months, it may be in 3 years. I don't know, and it's okay, you know. And I think there's also often this pressure, especially when it comes to money. You should have already like crossed a certain income ceiling. And I'm pretty relaxed with all of this because I'm like, you know what's going to happen? I'm ready for it and it's going to happen. And I'm doing actually pretty fine. I'm so grateful that I'm in a place where I can do my business full time. You know, I'm doing what I love and there's room to growth. And that's okay for me. But it's not this like, yeah, I have to show off or I have to say I reached this milestone, you know, like for some
Yeah.
reason I'm like, I'm chilled.
It's so good. That's so good. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Yeah. So much of our life, it's kind of like, I'm going to be married by the time I'm this, I'm going to have kids by the time I'm that, and so much of our life is this checklist of what we should be achieving and what we're doing. And when we find this space where we're living more in our purpose, that tends to dissolve
Mm,
more and more. It can creep up, and then we get the reminder of, well, would you like to go back into that other life where that
mhm,
was,
mhm,
felt safe to you?
mm.
And so everything that you just described, I mean, if I didn't have and if you didn't have the experience of that corporate world, I wouldn't know how good this is.
Yeah, you know, it's so true. I'm actually very, very thankful for it. Like, while I have to be honest, I complained quite a bit in the last few years, you know, it's just
Yeah.
part of the game.
Yeah.
But I always remember I share this at my last annual review meeting with my boss, which was almost like 8 or 10 months before I got fired. I gave him my business card that I'm a coach now, and I was so excited. And of course, I mean, she was like, "Oh, she's not in this anymore. We need to find a replacement." And that's what they started to do. I actually had to train another girl already. I mean, it was also very obvious, everything.
Yeah.
But I guess there was a deep sense of trust within me. And yeah, this frustration that I went through and this almost lethargy and feeling drained and unmotivated because I knew my potential is not fully being used here. It's also really good that, yeah, you and I, we experienced it because then the challenges you also have being an entrepreneur, because again, it's not just this like sugar-coated path where everything is super easy. You know, there's lots of challenges, up and downs where I think life keeps testing you, like, how committed are you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And yeah, I'm like you said, I'm also very, very grateful that I've been there, I've experienced it, and
yeah.
no, I don't want it. It's
Well,
okay.
and the fact that you made that action of giving your boss the business card, if that doesn't show the universe that you're ready, if
Yeah.
that doesn't say, okay, she's ready, all right, we're going to just
Mm,
start to put things into action and move things,
mm,
so that sure, the journey always has its ups and downs, but there's going to be this safety within it that we're going to
mm,
provide, that we're going to surround you with, and that's what keeps you attracting who you're attracting,
mm.
um, and finding the clients that are looking for you.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. No, it's also funny because I wasn't even scared. And
Yeah.
my first clients came from people in the company because I talked about it. I was excited about it, you know?
Yeah.
So I have one more question for you, which I
Yeah.
think is very deep. In human design, we have one of the centers in the human design chart is the spleen center. The spleen center is the center for intuition, the sense of timing in the moment, right? Is this energy. And that's the higher expression, right? Where we trust our intuitive knowings. And it also has a shadow expression, like the lower frequency, which is all fears. So it's the fear of the future in particular, because there's actually one gate, it's gate 57, it's called the gate of intuition, which in my chart is my unconscious sun. It has a lot to do with my well-being, my vitality in that
Mm.
context. And I know anytime I'm not listening to my intuition, like I'm kicking my own butt, you know, like
Yeah.
in some way.
Right.
Um, but of course, I think the more highly intuitive we are, there can also be a lot of potential for fears as well. And at least me growing up, I was a ball of fears, like
Hmm.
almost paralyzed by it. And obviously now it has shifted a lot. But I would love to hear from you and your experience. How can you distinguish when is it your intuition that's the right thing to do, and when is it like the fear that's kicking in that's actually not serving you?
Yeah. Um, I do an exercise where it's almost like I'm looking at myself in a mirror when, and let's say that there's the fear kicking in. I'm trying to think of a good example. Okay, it's not a recent one, but when I was growing up, I had a fear that I would be homeless.
Mm.
That I just was never going to have a home. Very interesting.
Mm.
Very interesting. Don't think it's from this life. Think
Yeah.
it carried over. And if I were to have that, and the home that I live in right now was very guided to me. My dad made sure of that. And it's a
Mm.
different story that I won't go into. But right now, if that old story creeps in, it's almost like I can go outside of myself, turn into myself and say, what would happen? What would it take for me to be homeless right now?
Mm.
How many steps would it take for me to be living on the side of a road in a box? Like that's the image, that fear.
Mm. Mm.
And I mean, there's a good 100 steps that I would need to cross in order for that to happen. And it is facing the shadow portion of yourself, this fear, this dark fear of yourself that is
Mm.
really trying to manipulate you into going back to a way of safety that does not necessarily serve you.
Mm.
So when I can really go outside myself, turn and look at myself and question what my fear is trying to say to me,
Yeah.
that gives me a lot of clarity of how absurd that story is that
Yeah.
they're
No, I
trying
love
to
it. It's
say.
basically like to actually face the fear, right? To walk towards it and like, hey, let's have a conversation. Because I
Exactly.
think when we're running away from it, when we pretend it's not there, it actually keeps chasing us and it's
Yeah.
much more likely to manifest. Yeah.
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 So to
Yeah.
have the courage also intuitively to like, hey, let's talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
See
And
how insane this is.
yeah, it really helps too with like conflict resolution with
Yeah.
if you're having to have a difficult conversation with somebody,
Mhm.
saying, okay, what are these different scenarios that I'm making up, especially if it's a loved one, you know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that would be my tip.
Yeah, I love this. And one final question that I have for you is what's the biggest nugget of wisdom that you would like to share with the listeners?
Oh, life can be a lot easier, a lot easier. I do this practice where if I'm getting down, like if there's a tech issue or something, those always get me riled up real quick. If I can just kind of put like a little bit of a half smile on my face and just say out loud, this is so easy. And like I'll usually laugh like that. Um, it just opens up an easier way of living. And again, we all have really difficult times and people go through so many challenges and heartache, and that is part of this wonderful world that we live in. And you always have support and guidance from higher self, from higher sources, and you are never, ever, ever alone.
Hmm, that's really powerful. I love the thing with the easy. I use the word a lot because yeah, when we focus on that, we open ourselves up also to find a simpler, easier solution, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I love this. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's really, really inspiring. And it's just such a beautiful role model that you are to live this more intuitive life, because I really feel that with like living in your genius, right? I think we all would just live in our genius if we would listen to our intuition rather than to what we think we should do in terms of our career, what our parents said, or what's accepted in the family, and really have the courage. And I think even though it's not what we all do in society today, but it starts with one, right? And we can then create a ripple effect as more and more people, like just the podcast, right? People are listening today and they're like, wow, if these two ladies can do this, like I can do it too. And then they can inspire others, and we are eventually millions. And at some point, that's what we do as society, and we just live a much more easeful, abundant life that's aligned with our true nature. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. And it was so nice to meet you. And I love what you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. And you listeners, thank you so much for tuning in, for listening. I hope this inspired you to connect more with your intuition as well. And again, thank you so much, Jen. It was such a delight. And I'm very excited to be back with you all on the next episode. Bye, everyone.